This is Cornell from the Talk Tank podcast. I'm coming at you from a parking lot at Walmart, place I can get peace these days. So, I'm on my way home and just thought I would do a bit of an intro to my upcoming podcast with Kelly Gorham. The near-death experience here that I interviewed a couple of days ago. Very fascinating story. Somebody said to me the other day, Cornell, let's call this person Nathaniel. Nate for short. Okay, let's go with Nate. So, Nate said to me, hey Cornell, so where did you get the name for your podcast, Talk Tank? I'm like, well Nate, I had a dream many years ago about a talking tank. And, true story, the tank was like, it wasn't like a Panzer with some German tank commander shouting orders in German at his helmeted minions marching beside the tank with big long trench coats. It was like a cartoon tank, much like, you ever see that movie Cars? I'm sure if you've got kids, you've seen Cars. The cars that talk and they've got the big eyes and stuff. It was kind of like that, and had a big, the turret was its nose, and it was a big friendly tank, but it was telling me the secrets of the universe. It was one of the most amazing dreams I ever had. But this talking tank was, and I don't know where it came from, but it was very friendly, cartoonish. That's how I actually came up with the name, the Talk Tank, for the podcast. That's not the only time I've had that dream. Well, it is the only time I've had that dream, but it's not the only time I've ran into this benevolent creature. I once ran into him as a psychedelic benevolent washing machine. I was having a pretty bad time at my best friend's house, and I dropped some acid. I was about 17 years old, and there was about 15 of us, I guess. Bit of a party going down, and we had all dropped acid, but it was my first time, and I wasn't having a good time. Let's just say that I was having a hellish trip, one long panic attack. And I think what triggered it was, we were all watching Poltergeist. The Indian's face was contorting and everything just looked kind of hellish. And it felt like the walls were closing in on me, And my friends, I don't know what you're talking about. All I can see is bright colours and stuff. And it's really pretty. And so obviously we were having a totally different experience. And I started to have what I can only really describe as hell on earth. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Silent Hill, when I don't know if it's reality. I think reality drops away, or a fake reality drops away and uncovers the hell beneath it, and Pyramid Head comes out and all these creatures start eating your body and stuff, and that's kind of how it felt. It was hellish, and I didn't want to freak everybody else out, so I got my friends. You're talking like 1987 here, so I got my friend's big ghetto blaster and went in and started playing that Wall song and Goodbye Cruel World. I just started playing that on a loop, and I was crying. I was crying in the corner with this, my arms basically wrapped around this ghetto blaster, and people were coming in every now and again to check on me to see if I was okay, because I was having a really bad time. It was serious. I never want to experience that again, but at one point, two of my best friends burst through the door, and they're laughing. And I mean, they're laughing so hard they can't get out what they're trying to tell me, and they're falling over each other, and they're just in hysterics. And I kind of started to kind of smile a little bit, and what's up? What are you trying to tell me? And they told me to come with them, so I actually went with them, and my friend had an outside washing machine in a kind of a little porch area. And we went outside, and the washing machine was going through a cycle. And it was like a mini washing machine, but it had two lights where, if you can imagine, if this is a creature, which is how it appeared to me, it was like a creature with two lights for eyes. And its mouth was the big circle, where you load the clothes. And it was running through a cycle, so it just sounded like it was trying to communicate with us by, grumbling, when the clothes were going around. And it was like this benevolent, psychedelic washing machine, and we laughed at this for so long. And that brought me out of my bad trip. The rest of the night was just a great time, but that was a terrible time. But this that was another kind of occasion where this benevolent, I have a hard time saying it, benevolent creature came to me and tried to communicate with me. But this dream I was telling you about the talking tank, I was trying to find a name for the podcast, and I really couldn't think of one. Then it came to me one day, the talk tank, and I got someone right away in Brazil to get to work on it. I said I want like a cartoon tank, and he did a really good job. It only cost me like $50, so he came back with all of the files. I went on Facebook and asked him. He gave me a few different options of colors and stuff, and I finally settled on a color. Then my brother-in-law from Italic Pig in back in Northern Ireland saw the final result, and he's like, "Dude," he said, "you should put a mic on the end of that turret." And I'm like, "Oh, God damn you!" I'm like, "I've already got this finished. It's all done." He said, "Yeah, but you've got the master file, don't you?" I think it's an AIFF file or something. I can't remember what it is. Excuse me for butchering that, but the master file anyway can be edited. So he said, "Just send me that and I'll edit it for you." So he's working on that in Northern Ireland, and then I had my friend Brian in town here working on some Photoshop stuff for me. So that's how I came up with my face with the background of the the talk tank in the background, because I wanted to show my face, because I like to see. I'm a podcast addict, and I love to see what the hosts look like, and I don't know, it just gives a face to the podcast, I think. So that's why I did that. But anyway, but the whole podcast thing was basically another creative outlet that I wanted to try, because I'd already tried music. And I've always been kind of a spiritual person, and I've known that there's something else. Not exactly what I was told growing up, but I knew that there was something else, that, there was an afterlife as such. I don't know how that looks, but I always knew there was an afterlife. And I always like to think that, I know myself and a lot of other people that I know have lost a lot of people close to them this year. And it's nice sometimes to know that they're out there somewhere. Maybe not in the form that we imagine them to be, but it's comforting to think that maybe my mother's still in the universe in some kind of shape or form. Probably not. I don't believe in a traditional heaven where my family are all waiting on me, and I don't think it works like that. I don't think we can comprehend how it actually works, but I do think there's an afterlife, or a parallel dimension that is around us all of the time, as Kelly will talk about in this podcast. She basically, I've always thought what she confirms is the kind of thing I've always thought, and one of the reasons I started this podcast was to talk to people, and you get to meet some really interesting people through doing this. And what the whole point of this podcast is for me to get out there and interview people about subjects that I'm interested in and learn more about them. So it's kind of a learning experience for me too. And so one of the subjects on my bucket list for this podcast was people that have had near-death experiences. That was a big one. Another one is combat veterans, but near-death experience was at the top of the list, along with a ghost hunter and Bigfoot hunter, like I've already done, because everybody loves the paranormal, because I think it's something to do with, like I've just said, that they want to believe that their loved ones have gone to another place and they're still with us in some capacity. So Kelly had a pretty... She's been through the ringer, and she's basically seen the other side, and she's come back to tell a story, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about Kelly Gorham's story about being born with a pretty serious illness and almost dying a few times, and coming back and telling their story. Now, different cultures and stuff, they basically say the same thing. There might be different players according to their culture. I mean, they might see different gods or different archetypes and stuff like that, but the experience is pretty much the same thing. And this all started for me when I was like about 15, and I would have out of body experiences, just like some people call it astral projection. I don't know, but I would come out of my body very regularly, and I would see myself in my bed, and I'd be floating around my room, and it was as real as I'm sitting here right now, and I'm totally convinced that that was the case. Sometimes I would just be floating around the room, and other times I'd be like flying around the city, like, you know, like Peter Pan. It was crazy. And it still happens from time to time, but it hasn't happened for a while. But it used to happen, you know, at least once a month. And sometimes it would be a very psychedelic experience where there would be creatures and everything would look really different. And sometimes it would be really scary, where I felt there was a malevolent presence in the room with me, and I wouldn't want to leave my body. So I would kind of fight it. And other times I would just let myself go, and that's the times that when I'd be like high above the city and just like flying around the place, saying to myself, I can't believe this is happening. This is so real, and it's happening. So I've always been really, really interested in out of body experiences, especially when someone dies. And I think Kelly basically flatlined a couple of times. So she did die, and then she came back, and this podcast is her story. And I'll also tell you something else about Kelly. I think she's psychic. I think these experiences have opened her up to something. She's sensitive somehow, and she can sense things that other people can't sense. So therefore, I think she's got like really great psychic abilities. Fascinating young lady, and it was really nice to talk to her. And she's going to be up next. See you on the other side. We're here with Kelly Gorham. Yep. Kelly got in contact with me via Facebook because I put up a post on the local Clinton forums about just looking for people with great stories to tell and stuff like that. And I was actually amazed at how many people got in contact with me. I've got a whole list of people to go through. Oh. Yeah, there's one lady who contacted me, and she had been a prison guard for like 25 years. I'll be speaking to her next, and she lives right in town as well. Wow. So like right away I got two really good hits, and yours was a really good one because I've been looking for someone with near-death experience. Mm-hmm. I actually was doing a job for a guy up in Pepperell, and he's like 70 something. He was pronounced dead, and he was like hung upside down and stuff, and somehow they brought him back to life. They tried some like new technique on him, and they brought him back to life, and he had all of these experiences. And I'm like, well, let's talk about them, like after I do this job, get in contact with me. But he never did. He didn't really want to talk about it. So I'm glad that you reached out to me. Where do we start? Where would you like to start?
I guess, where the first one happened with a lung collapse.
Right. So what exactly is lung collapse?
So I have lung disease. I was born with a congenital malformation where my airways are smaller than normal. My sinuses are smaller than normal. I had surgery since like a couple years ago to open them up, but I also have lung disease, so my lungs will fill with mucus and fluid, and they can't handle it. So I will have I've had partial lung collapses. I've had full lung collapses twice and respiratory failure. And I've lived with that my whole life, not being able to breathe.
Really?
So in this small town, growing up, I was known as the girl with the machine throughout the school because because I would use my machine to breathe in the nurse's office. And at one point in the old high school, they had to put machines and air filters in all the classes I was in because of the quality of air before they built a new high school. So I became known with that label, the girl with the machine.
The girl with the machine. I might call that the podcast, that, if you don't mind. I had actually a couple of different titles that I was thinking of, a couple of witty titles, but now, were you offended by that?
No.
No?
No.
So you've had this from you were a kid?
Yep.
So what was your first hospital visit? I mean, were you going in and out of this from you were a kid, or did the actual lung collapse?
In and out since I was a kid, out of the hospital. My first near-death experience was when I was 14, freshman year of high school, and it was, I think I caught something viral. If I catch something, a cold or the flu, that's it. Like
Really?
my third near-death experience was I caught the flu and had full respiratory failure, and that was crazy. So if I catch colds or anything, it's like life or death. And I think at that time I had something viral. And there's some details that are fuzzy, but I remember sitting in the living room waiting for the ambulance to come, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I was put into the ambulance to be brought over from Clinton Hospital to UMass, and in that time frame, they didn't turn the oxygen tank on. I remember that. I was like kind of in and out of consciousness when I got to UMass, and I remember somebody yelling at one of the EMTs that they asked how many liters of oxygen I was on, and then they discovered that it wasn't even coming out. So at that point, I had severe oxygen deprivation. My oxygen level was very low. And in the meantime, I had all this inflammation and muscle constriction, so my lungs were full of fluid and the muscles were closing. And so I suffered what's called a pneumothorax. One of my lungs collapsed, and the other one was a partial collapse called atelectasis. And I remember my mom was upset. She was crying. They didn't know. I got the feeling like they didn't know if I was going to make it, what was going on. I remember they held me down and they put shots in my wrist because they said if they shot it in my wrist, it would go through my body faster. I think it might have been epinephrine they were putting in me because I was in and out of consciousness, and then I went out. After they put that shot in my wrist, I was out. And then I guess they worked on me. They gave me steroids and breathing treatments, oxygen. And I eventually came to later, still in the emergency room, and then was moved to ICU for about a month. I couldn't move in the ICU bed because lung collapse is extremely painful. It feels like you're being crushed you're being crushed from the inside out. It feels like you can't move.
And how do they treat that? I mean, the pain they must have to give you like the strongest painkillers and stuff.
Yes, I had a morphine drip, a lot of steroids. I've been on steroids since I was a kid, on and off for a long time.
Now, is there much panic associated with this? I mean, obviously I've had like situations where I felt like I've kind of got claustrophobia, and if I'm in a situation where I feel I can't breathe right, I get panicked very quickly. Are you able to manage that? Okay.
The anxiety I've
Yeah.
learned to.
Right.
When I was younger and it was like new to me, I had to learn how to do that, because if you panic when your body's already not
Yeah.
circulating air, it's that you're screwed. I remember prior to this ninth grade episode, I remember being in the emergency room, and I had a doctor tell me to find a point on the wall and stare at it, and just hone in on every single detail while I was breathing in the medicine and everything, so that it would keep me from being frazzled and panicking.
Yeah.
So I just
Yeah.
focused. So ever since then, when I would be in the emergency room or the hospital, I would be breathing through my mask, and I would look up at the ceiling, and I would start counting all the little dots
Yeah.
on ceiling tiles. And like that was my go-to. There's dots on the ceiling tiles, and I would just count, and I would count and count and count.
That's what therapists tell you to do. They tell you to be really aware of your surroundings. If you're driving your car, feel the steering wheel, and be aware of what you're smelling and stuff like that. If you're having to deal with a panic attack or something. Okay, so where were we? So I was asking about, you're in the hospital for a month,
Yeah.
not able to move.
Yeah, for a while because of the pain. Eventually that subsided, my breathing. I had to do exercises and things for my breathing, and then I was released. But during that initial visit, when I was brought in by ambulance and in between being treated in the emergency room and then in the ICU ward, is when I had the near-death experience. And that was the first among, I had 3.
Okay, this is the first one.
The first one, and this one was probably one of the most intense ones. The second one was more of like a more intense physical battle, but this one was more of an outer leaving. It wasn't, I don't even want to say leaving my body, because it was like I was still existing where I was. It's really weird to explain. But what happened during that one was I became extremely intensely aware of being aware. So it was like I stepped out, like I knew I was in the hospital bed. There's my body. It's, fighting to breathe. I was being like brought in and out of consciousness, so in and out. It felt like being in and out of my body, but at one point everything just went black, and it was like everything went black, and I got scared, and then everything felt like euphoric, very blissful. It looked like the color amber. I knew it didn't feel like I was in a body. It didn't feel like I was a physical, I couldn't move like, an appendage or something. Yeah. And it reminded me of when I was younger, and I would ride in the car, and I would close my eyes, and the sunlight would dance on the back of my eyelids. That was the colors I was seeing. And I was just really aware that I was aware that I existed in like a really, like the kind of like intense awareness of it that could drive somebody mad.
Right. Just not to interrupt you, but one time I had a meditation experience, and it's funny that you say the amber thing, because I was only meditating for 5 minutes and everything just dropped away, and all of a sudden I was in this space, and it was eternal, but it was that's the same color that you're describing. It was nothingness, but it was amber.
Yep.
So there's something strange to that. Anyway.
Yep. And there was just that knowing that I existed, but at the same time, because I didn't feel I was in a body or I had a body, it's like I also was aware something else was aware of me, being aware of myself.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's scary. It got scary because then it's like I'm not in a body, and I'm just completely everything that's me, and something is aware of me.
So you're totally exposed to.
So you're just naked. That's you're totally naked. You're, you know, being in a body, like, we can pretend, you know,
Yeah.
because I do believe in a higher power in God because of my experience. And it's like, I think of that now, like being here, it's like we cover up things, you know.
Right.
Here we think we can because it's the physical, like, you know, creates that illusion. But really, we're always completely naked before.
Yeah, but we just have a certain amount of tools to deal with the material plane, and we're not always aware of. Otherwise, you would get nothing done.
Yeah.
If we were all walking around aware of that, but we'll get into that. This went on for a while.
Yep, and then I went through a thing of like a man came to me. Intuitively, my heart of hearts, I know it was Jesus, and patted me on the head, and he's done that he's done that also in years later. In a dream, I had a dream and he did that, but he patted my head, and then I was just guided through things, like watching movies of my life and being, and just of life and being here. And it was like anything that was like a question I had or was causing me like to not feel safe and comfortable. Like anytime I'd move away from the bliss, it would start almost like intuitively. It was like showing me things and then in guiding me and like showing me, but teaching me. But it was like almost like not verbally though. It was just intuitively and telepathically, and it would just show me things, and I would see pictures and symbols and different things, and it went on for a while, and it showed me like my place. So I was being shown things in my childhood and my place in my family, my purpose and things because of my place in my family, things that only I can understand and see because I'm the only one that's me. And then that was just like a lot more of the focus than, you know, other things that like were problems, I guess, were cleared up quickly. Like that's, you know, not important as this is what we need to go through. This is more important. This
is when you're in the hospital the first time.
Yep.
This is your first near-death experience.
Yep.
And is that the end of it, or did it keep going? Did you meet other people, or was it? I
met angels and like I call them heavenly hosts because they were entities. They're not human, but they were definitely existed. They're definitely very real to me.
If I've ever had just an out-of-body experience, and they happen, I don't know how they happen, but I remember, like, you know, seeing myself in bed and knowing that there's someone else in the room. Sometimes it's scary because it feels like a malevolent force, and it's like, and you're trying to. Sometimes if I would just let myself go and float, I'd be fine, and you know. But it's like you want to hold on, and you get scared because there's this thing in the room and you don't know what it is, and it's like. Sometimes it's like a demon or something, but then I'm just the next day I'm like that was just that, but it's so real at the time. But there's definitely something, and that's why this subject has always fascinated me.
Yes, especially because after this, then I was like deeply curious about the nature of reality, because then what do we not see that is here? Because when I was in that, you know, amber place and then going through that, there's not like here is here and after death is a separate place. It was like
it's all around us.
All around us.
So you're 14 years old at this point?
Yep. And then I went back to school after that. I was out of school for a month after that and tutored at home until my lungs were better. The really cool thing that happened in that period was the pulmonologist I had at that time wanted to remove my right lung because that was the lung that was really bad. And they told my mom that it was deteriorating. After this experience, when I got home for that month that I was home and I was homeschooled, I spent a lot of time doing artwork and beading and meditating and just resting. And I kept going to that amber place in my mind. And my lungs actually spontaneously regenerated, so they did not have to remove my lung. And I totally believe that those coincided, that the experience I had and then coming home and just how going into that place and staying there, and I was like really praying. I didn't want to lose my lung.
Right. Okay, so now that you're 14 years old at this point, and you said that was the most intense one?
Yeah.
I don't know what the timeline is here. Yeah, I know you had another two of them, but is there something that happened between that and then the next one?
Yes, so between that and the next one, I started experiencing, seeing like how I saw the amber when I was, in that state. I would see colors just being, aware, just in regular conscious states. I would see colors. I just became very more empathic than usual. And I would see colors or shapes or things, and also all of that. So the whole experience I had, at 14, and then these things happening. I was in high school. I kept a lot of this to myself because I didn't know anybody to talk to about these things, or and I never heard anybody talk about these things. And even in church, my family is Christian, but the stuff that I experience is nothing like I hear Christian. They don't talk about that kind of stuff. No,
they don't want. Sometimes I think that they don't want you to know that kind of stuff, that you can't access the afterlife while you're still alive, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They think that you have to wait until you die before you can, whereas the Buddhists think that you can reach those states now.
Yeah.
Now you've heard of like DMT and all that kind of stuff. You've heard of that.
Yep. And so the stories I've heard of that are similar to the near-death experience I've had, but with the exception of really being like the way the inner, I don't know how to explain, like this inner knowing that like was communicating with me. I don't really hear them really talk about that much. Like anything that came up that I had a question to, it was like nothing was off to be answered.
Yeah, I'd be really afraid to do that stuff, actually. I'd be afraid to lose my mind.
Yeah, I didn't see like aliens or things like other people on DMT. Although I guess what might be angels to me might have been aliens to them, because there was definitely the presence of other beings. But because of that, I've been curious about people who have DMT experiences.
Yeah. For me now, having like 4 kids, I feel that for myself it would be irresponsible for me to mess around with stuff like that. Because I've done hallucinogenics like when I was like, as a teenager and stuff, and I can see how things can get out of hand pretty quick. Most of my experiences were quite good, but there was a couple that were pretty dicey. And thank God I'm of sound mind, but I can see how some people don't come back because you're exposed to, like you say, you're naked.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the tools to deal with that kind of stuff, you're in dangerous territory. So you started you were already Christian, so you're already in a Christian family, being raised by your parents.
So growing up, we went to church, but it was like the thing to do on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It wasn't talked about at home. We didn't pray at home. It wasn't like that. It was just that because my grandmother, she was one of the deacons here at one of the churches, and so Christianity was just part of our family. But as far as my family growing up, it was just like a task to do on Sunday.
Yeah.
It wasn't even going to my family with like what happened would be like they wouldn't know how to handle it.
It's strange because actually I talk about this with my friends in the last podcast I did, and Dave, my friend David, he was a Christian for a while, and he found it strange that that Christians don't accept certain things that are clearly in the Bible, like the Watchers and the Nephilim and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, if you call yourself a Christian, you have to accept, these things. And a lot of Christians will just say that you're nuts if you allude to anything supernatural, which is
weird,
ironic.
Yeah, especially like when it's said the kingdom is within.
Yeah.
So it's like that whole experience of being in a place of amber, hearing, Holy Spirit, like, speak to me. That's who I felt was guiding me. Because in the Bible it says that he guides us into truth. He guides us, he answers our questions, he guides us in truth. So that's what it felt like when I was in that place, was like the things that were coming up, whatever I was seeing one way, or was an issue, it was like he would totally step in. And
yeah. So now, what church was this that your family were part of?
German Congregational Church on Haskell Ave.
I mean, I was raised Catholic myself, but so after all of this, did you go on a search for spirituality, or was it?
Yes, so that was high school I did, because the questions I had after that, especially like with hell, because I experienced, my experience of heaven and hell was just totally different than what's taught. And then and just, what does that mean? The kingdom within and heaven, because I had an experience. It's been, for my whole life, has been an ongoing thing that's come up for me and has guided my whole life. And there was just questions I had that nobody could answer. So I would just read a lot and seek it out.
You said you read a lot of Sam Harris. Did you read his book, Waking Up?
Yeah, I've listened to his podcasts and his talk. I've listened to Joe Rogan and his talk with Joe Rogan. Yeah.
He's very much a materialist, though, in a lot of senses, right? I think he stops short. Maybe it's because of the scientific community that he's involved in.
Yeah.
But
that's why my favorite is David Chalmers.
Yeah, I haven't heard of him. I'm going to have to check him out. I haven't had time to check him out.
Because he will say that, we don't have an answer to the hard problem of consciousness, that, it's still, materialism still can't explain the subjective experience of it.
So your second out-of-body experience, do you want to go into that?
Okay. So that was, I believe I was about 22. I just had my daughter. She was a baby. And I woke up one morning and my lung was collapsed. I had what's called spontaneous pneumothorax. It just spontaneously collapsed.
Just like that? Just
like that. I woke up, boom, my lung collapsed. I ended up crawling. I was on the floor. At that point, it feels like you're being crushed by a Mack truck is on top of you. Your body's being crushed. So I was on the floor. I was in an upstairs bedroom. So I crawled from my upstairs bedroom down into my living room. No one was home. And at that time, we had the cordless phones that hang on the wall. So I couldn't reach the cordless phone on the wall. So I started crawling out my front door to get help.
Is this right here?
This was over on Water Street, where I grew up. And I couldn't yell or talk because I had no lung capacity. So I just started crawling, hoping somebody would come or see me. My neighbor ended up seeing me, so she helped me into her apartment, and I ended up on the floor in my neighbor's apartment while she called 911 for them to come get me.
Could you breathe or talk or anything? Well, obviously you could breathe.
I couldn't talk above a whisper, and breathing was excruciating. And then when I was in the ambulance, I just felt like I was I didn't feel like I was inside my body. I don't that could also be trauma related, but it also did feel like I was I could feel my own will existed, and like I was fighting my will to live. I was experiencing, so with this near-death experience, I experienced being pure will, and fighting to stay inside my body while they were driving me.
Probably because you had a kid.
Yeah.
That changes things.
Yeah. So funny you say that, because the first one I had, my first near-death experience when I was fighting, I remember before I went unconscious, my fighting chance for my fight for my will to live was because I hadn't had my first kiss yet.
Really?
So I fought for that to stay. I was like, I haven't even been kissed yet. No.
That's going to be a funny anecdote. I'll have to put that in the show notes.
And then, yeah, the second one was because I just had my daughter. I can't leave my daughter. So I fought. Yep. And then the third one was I caught the flu, and I was in the hospital, and I don't know if they didn't think it was as bad as it was, or I didn't, but I didn't think to ask to have like a chair in my room to go to the bathroom, or to even ask for help to go to the bathroom. So I started to get up on my own and walk down the hall. And I ended up having I had respiratory failure, so I ended up collapsing in the hall. And then when they got me back into the ER room, I was a code blue. Because it was too much, like that was way too much on my body. I could not breathe.
Now, code blue for our listeners in other countries it's basically your
flat line.
Flat line.
Couldn't breathe. I collapsed in the hall. They brought me in the room, and I was flatlined.
Is this right up here in Clinton?
Leominster.
And how long ago was this?
I was brought into Leominster Hospital, and this was like 2013, I think. It was about 5 years ago, I think.
Wow. And did you travel out of your body in this one?
In this one, it was more of like solidifying that I'm safe. God's always with me. Like it's, I don't know how to explain it. That's just so solidified in me now from that. Things that I believed, and having faith and that I'm not alone, and that He's with me, it was just really solidified.
So you basically, throughout from these three experiences, you have a deep belief in God.
Yes.
The Christian God. I mean, do you think that it's, you think everybody has a different interpretation, or you know what I mean, through culture?
Yeah.
So,
but same God. Yeah,
I think so too.
Yep.
I think that everybody there is a. I do believe in God myself, but I think that people just have a different interpretation to culture.
And different. Some I see it as some interpretations are our own projections being God,
right.
And when that's wiped away, it's what's left is Him.
And everybody experiences the same thing,
Yep.
because a lot of the near-death experiences that I've read about, it's basically the same thing. It might change depending on where, like you said, where they were raised or the kind of culture they're brought up in, but it's the same kind of thing. Now, did you see any family members that had died?
I smelled roses, which reminded me of my grandmother, so I felt her with me. I didn't see her visually, but that she was with me, yes. And then I also had a friend who passed away of suicide. He mixed medications and passed away.
Oh boy.
And I saw him, and he was definitely with me.
Now, did you listen to the episode about the ghost hunter?
No.
And I already told the story, but I'll tell it you. I can leave it in the podcast or not. But the guy that taught me my trade growing up, he lost his son when he was 29. This is about 6 years ago, and he found him in his bed in his apartment in the city, and everybody was really devastated. But everyone called him D. His name was Damien, and everyone called him D. And they were just, the funeral procession was going up this little like country lane in Ireland. It's really like one lane, and you have to go up onto the embankment to let cars past and stuff. But so this car was coming, and it went up onto the embankment to let the funeral car and the procession past, and the license plate read all OK D, AL OK D, just with the letter D, and it was just, I have a picture of it somewhere, but I mean, I don't think that Alan was that spiritual before that, but he said, you know, when he showed people that picture, everyone was floored. It was just like, that's nuts. That's one of the most convincing things I've ever seen. Like, I haven't had any experiences really myself. I wish I could. You know, I don't mean to die and to see the other side and stuff, but I would love to have some kind of experience to, you know, verify the afterlife. But now, what else had you talked to me about? You've read Ken Wilber, you said.
Yeah, so when I was exploring in high school different things,
Yeah,
I read.
He's a tough one.
Yes.
I tried him, but I kind of give up.
Yeah.
I'm not that academic.
So I think one of the first ones I read was Gary Zhukov's books on the seat of the soul. But it didn't, I don't know, it wasn't enough. Because it was still like, I was still so perplexed with just consciousness itself, because I had that pure experience of being it, of like having that. That's why when I listen to, you know, others, you know, talk about consciousness and it being, you know, arising from biological processes, it's like I immediately go back to that space of like being it purely. It still doesn't explain it, how you can, witnessing being conscious and having, you know, it doesn't explain the experience of knowing you're having that experience of being conscious.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It's definitely, there's definitely something. I don't know what it is, but there's definitely something. Now, you had talked about, you had said you had a lot of different experiences. Do you want to go into a couple of those? I mean, you said you had some kind of experience at the high school.
Yeah, after I got comfortable. Well, my friends, so my sister knew about, you know, some things that happened when I passed and things I believed, and now that changed. And my friends were open and listened to my craziness.
Right.
And so I openly would share if I saw colors and things like that. And one of the teachers who at that time did events in the community of haunted gatherings invited me to one of them and asked if I saw anything or felt anything while I was there. And I did sense things. I sense things all the time anyway, because we're just always, it's always all around us, you know. So it's like, if you want to sense, you will, because they're there. But his was intriguing because when I left the building we were at and I was walking home, this still happens to me to this day. I don't know how to explain how it happens, but it's like my physical vision will disappear and I will see things in my visual field that are there. And I'm not out of my body. I don't know. I just see it. So I saw, I think it was John Adams in my mind's eye. And so the next day at school, I went to his classroom because he told me if I saw anything, you know, that night or after we left, to please let him know. And
this is the person that we're not going to mention.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I went to his classroom, and I just want to say I love when things like this happen too, because it's like because like after you have experiences like this and you don't have other people to talk about, you know, with it, you can feel like out of sorts, like maybe maybe I just lost it, you know, or like maybe it's just PTSD because I get traumatic
Right.
experience, leave, lung collapse and whatnot. But so this kind of experience is like confirmation that no, like these things really did happen. Because how else would I know certain things? So I went to his classroom and I told him that I saw something when I left. And he said, and I remember him saying this, he said, depending on what you tell me right now, you might confirm something that I've always wondered my whole life. Like, I've wondered for years, because I told him what I saw was actually somebody that is a presence around him, that I saw it in my mind's eye when I was walking home, but intuitively I understood it as this is somebody that's with him, associated with him and around him. So I told him it was John Adams, and he said that every year he visits his grave. That's like a huge historical...
John Adams, the president?
Yeah.
Really?
Is a big, like, he's, he teaches history, so
oh, right.
That's a huge historical figure to him, and that he visits his grave regularly.
And you didn't know that?
I didn't know any of that, no.
And he must have been floored.
He was, and actually he would walk on the other side of the hallway when I'd walk by, and then, like, we kind of didn't talk to each other after that.
Really? It freaked him out?
I think might have. I've learned through the years some things to keep to myself.
That's strange, because, I mean, here he is asking you to come along and, like, get your antenna out, and then when you confirm something, maybe he doesn't want you to see other stuff.
That's what happens a lot with people,
right.
And it's part of that nakedness of,
right.
like, we're still here with our skin on, so there's a chance I might not.
It's like my wife's a therapist, and people get kind of edgy around her because they think she can see into their soul. But she switches herself off when she's not working, and she always says to me, like, I noticed everything because I was raised in Northern Ireland, so it was like a really dangerous environment. And when I walk into a room, I'll be like a combat veteran or something. I'll be like watching for the exit doors and like watching who's around me and like sizing everybody up. But she doesn't do that. She's like, "Would you stop being so nosy?" But I'm like, "Well, it's a survival technique." Mm-hmm. So then there was a movie about that. What you're talking about is you're going to know the movie. You've probably seen it. The actor that I do not like was in it, but it was a really good movie. Bill Paxton was in it, and so was that Southern fella. And he could, when he touched people, he could see what was inside them. And
things and colors, and so I do that. So after that happened in high school, I actually went into I started laying hands. I learned Reiki.
Oh, really?
And then I went into body work and massage. I actually own a massage studio here on High Street where I do that, because and in the past 2 years now, since I opened the start of opening my own place, it's heightened.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, where is that? Is that the place across from Mr. Z's?
Yes, it's in the plaza next to Sims Cleaners.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't seen that. That's interesting.
Yep.
So you do Reiki and stuff, and you own a building right there?
Yep, next to Sims Cleaners.
That's where the old breakaways used to be. That little place there.
Yeah, in that plaza. Yep. I'm right inside there.
Okay, so you mentioned a Hell's Angel. Now I didn't know if you meant a Hell's Angel.
A biker.
Or a real Hell's Angel.
A Hell's Angel biker.
Right, so what was that story? That was fascinating.
Yes, so he was trying to tell... So we got into a conversation, and he was just very narcissistic. And...
most of them are.
So he was telling me that he believed he was half Nephilim. That he's a Hell's Angel, he's half Nephilim, and... what we believe about Lucifer and Satan isn't true. It's like, it's been, washed and...
Well, he's kind of half educated.
Yeah, I do believe that. That is true.
Yeah.
But the other stuff he was saying was a little wonky. But he was saying how he was more powerful than me because he was half Nephilim and he was a Hell's Angel. And so I immediately drew I feel like when God or Spirit speaks to me and he will direct me. I feel it, like I can sense when it's like very straightforward from him. And so I immediately said to him that actually in the Bible it says one day we will judge angels, and what is man? He's greater than that.
Right.
We sit.
So was this just a little quirk that he had that he would probably just tell girls and stuff? You think?
Maybe. I don't know.
Or did he really believe this?
I think he was trying to test me as a Christian, and he wanted me to believe that, he's more powerful than what I believe.
No. So, I'd asked you about, did you believe in like the traditional interpretation of Christianity, which you said kind of, but you have your own version. What about evil? Do you think evil exists?
Oh yeah.
This is something I always struggle with, especially when I see stuff like where children are abused and stuff, and I mean it's just mental. Like I said, my wife's a therapist.
It's evil, and I also see it as pure insanity.
Yeah, right.
But I also see it. See, that's the part. That's the stuff that I like. I like listening to when Sam Harris talks about, psychopaths and killers, and what he feels about them in prisons, and how we could treat them compassionately when you realize that they're made that way to. They're just doing what they do. That's how they're made. I don't know.
Do you think that possibly someone that has some kind, if there are evil spirits, now this is something I sometimes think of, like that guy that, I can't even talk to my wife about this because it just upsets her so much, but that guy Chris Watts, that recent case where he smothered his 2 little girls and killed his pregnant wife. No. He was an oil field worker down in Colorado, and yeah, he didn't want to be with his wife anymore, so he was having all these affairs and stuff on her, and they were a very successful couple, but to look at him, he's just handsome, mid-30s American guy, but he was an oil field worker. I don't know how it went down, but it's an upsetting case, but he basically smothered his little girls, and they were like 2 and 4, and dumped them into like these big vats of oil to hide their bodies, and then and he killed his pregnant wife and put her in a shallow grave. And I'm like that's not. It just doesn't look like insanity. It looks like he was possessed or something. I don't know. Maybe evil somehow sees an opening or somebody that's vulnerable and will take root.
I think the way I see some of that, because that's like the question of evil has been something I've wondered too.
Yeah.
And I see, there's forces, good and evil. There's bad angels, good angels. There's things around us that can influence us. But I also see it as what they influence is thoughts and ideas, that we can latch onto. So I think it's Richard Brody wrote a really cool book called Mind Viruses, where he talks about ideas and things work like viruses in our minds. And I believe that, definitely. And that, what else is out there we might not understand yet influences our minds. And that's also something I do agree with in Christianity, when like people like Joyce Meyer and other figures talk about the battlefield of the mind.
Yeah.
And like that's where spiritual warfare takes place.
Now, do you visit or do you go to church regularly now?
Yeah.
Which one?
I go in Faith Worship in Pepperell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. So, do you ever see do you see spirits and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. You do?
Yep. Or have visions of things, definitely.
Have you ever seen anything in here?
No, not really.
Because the first interview that I did was with Stephen Flaherty, and he's part of the Seven Hills Ghost Hunters, and we went into the Clinton Tunnel, and he had a recorder and we were asking questions, and we definitely heard stuff. If you listen to the very start of it, you can hear, voices, and I don't know how his equipment works, but he was telling me that, spirits are all around us, and I've never had any evidence of it. I'd love to be able to find out, but I just don't know. I guess I'm totally agnostic.
Like when I was at church, I had that thing happen where everything went black and there was just a picture of something. And so that happened to me, and it was a tape measure. And then it faded, and there was a lady in front of me. And I normally don't do this. Like, I went up to her and I said, I normally don't do this, but I saw this. And usually when I see something and it's that prominent like that, I know it's something. And so I will be bold. Like if I don't know if like something's my imagination or whatnot, then I'll keep it to myself. Or some things God tells me, and he'll tell me this is just between me and you. But other times, something like that, very prominent, I know to go be bold. So I went up to her and I told her that I saw this tape measure.
Tape measure? Floating.
And she pulled the tape measure out of her purse and said that she moved and she's been hanging pictures in her home. Right. And it's been an experience for her while she goes around this home to do that. So it meant something for her.
So there was... Yeah.
And then she let me, and I said, no one's going to believe me. So I asked her if I could have a picture of her holding the tape measure.
Really?
Yes. So, and then after that, she encouraged me, because our church has a school, the FSSM, it's long. So it's the Supernatural School of Ministry. So they teach people spiritual gifts and how to work them and use it for God's good.
This church that you go to?
Yes, so she encouraged me after that to go for that and to try for the prophetic team, because it was very precise.
That story I was telling you about, that Chris Watts story, it was actually a psychic had called the police and told them to look. She saw two oil tanks, and that ended up being where they found the little girls. So you're basically this whole thing, that this ongoing saga that you've had with the near-death experiences, it seems like it's opened you up to like psychic abilities almost.
Yeah, very sensitive to things. Yep.
And are you afraid of death anymore?
I'm afraid of death because I don't want to miss out on things here. But I'm not afraid of what'll happen when I die, like where I'm going or if I'll be okay. I know that. But my desire to stay in here in my body is because there's things to experience here that's not like there.
Yeah.
That's actually something I learned with angels coming to me, is that they express that to me, that they don't know what it's like to be in a body, so they're fascinated by us.
That's weird.
Because we have a completely different experience being in, this reality like this. How we relate to each other, how we relate to God is like we are in this form and experience it in a way that they don't.
So angels are jealous of us?
Some of them are, but some of them are fascinated, adore us, love us, want to help us. They're good, they're messengers, they're either they have their tasks that God gives them and they are obedient and are just absolutely fascinated.
So, I'll probably leave here and have like 1,000 questions, but you think that obviously heaven isn't a place, I've kind of seen that myself, that it is just, it's nothing that you can really comprehend. It's some kind of an expanse. It's a kind of another dimension or something. I don't know. But there are entities, and there is a God, and you believe that God is an entity. It's not just like the Star Wars.
A person, being.
You think it's a being?
Yeah, as a person, his personality. That's another thing that I experienced in my near-death, was the idea, because like when I was studying things later, after I went on my journey, after that experience in high school, and I would read about New Age stuff that, what they believe, that also you'd think, okay, like Christianity couldn't answer these questions. They could, but even they couldn't, because they have this kind of belief in like everything is all a part of everything, and then you leave your body and you become this like massive expanse of whatever God is, and you're just like this, blob. We're all a God blob kind of thing, running into each other. But my experience was
that you become part of it and just get swallowed up by it.
But that wasn't my experience. Was that like he was not just a presence, but a person, a very real presence and person, and he had a personality, and I did, and I didn't lose that, and that was something that also was very profound, in my experience, was that I was still Kelly. I was more Kelly than I was here, because it was like I was shown things by him about me that I wouldn't know, but like somebody, the way like God loves us, and the peace that he gave me, and the love that he was like showering me and showing me things. He was showing me things of me that made me more me than.
So it's kind of like when Val Kilmer played Jim Morrison in the Doors movie. He was more like Jim Morrison than Jim Morrison was.
Yeah.
Sort of like that. I always use that analogy. I love that analogy.
Because like the things that I thought were like me or whatever, I guess you could say the ego was like, that was kind of like dissolved away.
The first kiss didn't matter anymore.
And then I was just fully Kelly, but still Kelly. There was no, I was distinctly Kelly.
Because one thing I've always heard that, personality is part of your ego. That's interesting. And that you lose all of that when you lose your body or like go on a journey.
No, that's why when I came back, I was like so enamored and in love with God, and just completely changed by my experience, because it was that something that created everything knows me, and that I'm me. He's not this creator that created everything and I'm his creation, so he loves me because I'm him. It was, I'm distinctly me, and he sees me.
So what you're saying is that you're kind of separate from God, but at the same time...
like one but distinctly me.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So...
And we all are. That was also what I saw. So like when we leave from here, we recognize that now. We also all recognize each other, because we all know each other before we come here. I saw that too. That he knew me before I went into my body, before I was born, before my mother had me. And he showed me that, and like why I was born at the time I was born. Because my mother was married, she had children, and then I came 25 years later.
Oh, really?
So she had me in her mid-40s.
Oh, okay.
And he showed me like why it was that time frame and everything. It was really intense, but also that he knew me before he did that, and that was always his plan, for her to have me at that time.
People go down to Peru for like 3 weeks to find out this stuff.
Really?
And take ayahuasca. That's the medicine that people take down in Peru, and they like find out like all of this stuff. But you find all this stuff out at the age of 14.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, I guess.
So the body work and massage and going into that field was also related to all of that. So like from my experience of this, I was also shown that I'm meant to lay hands and be with people who are sick and suffering, and that I can connect with in other ways that people can't, because I've experienced those things. So I volunteer over at one of the hospitals nearby, and I do Reiki, and I lay hands at the cancer center, and I sit with them and people who are terminal or going through chemo.
Now, how's your health now?
It's still up and down. It's better since I had surgeries, but I still have to use my machine. I still sometimes need oxygen. and I have emergency steroids I keep on hand, and it's unpredictable, but not as bad as it was prior to my surgeries in, I want to say 2014.
But it's not something that you carry around with you like a cross. You know, you accept it, and it doesn't, like, you know, totally freak you out all the time. You're not in a state of
I'm just
emergency.
used to it now, and I talk about it with people who are experiencing the same things. Just relate to them.
Now, what does your husband think of all of this stuff? Does he have anything to do with it, or?
He's Christian, so he's fine with my
He's on board?
Yeah, he's on board with my crazy stories. But he's also seen things like I've saw or predicted, so he's watched me do that.
Wow.
So I think, like, I mean, it's not like I say one thing and, something else happens.
Yeah, so he has evidence.
Yeah.
I tried the whole spiritual route through Buddhism, and I mean, I'm just too ADD just to meditate or get any results. It's happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
But I was going to the centre there up in Worcester. They've got a place, and I actually went on a silent retreat and stuff with them into the Appalachian Trail, for 7 miles. But no one told me it was a silent retreat.
Oh, I couldn't do the silent retreat.
And I just thought, wow, these guys are really introverted. And I was talking the whole time.
I could.
And they're just like, the next morning when I'm sitting there and we're all like cooking breakfast and I'm just nattering away, And the abbot, the guy that was running the show, he was like, shh. I'm like, what's rude? He's like, this is a silent retreat. I'm like, well, you could have told me yesterday at 5 o'clock when we set off, because I hadn't stopped talking. Because I'm trying to get to know all these people, and I'd never met them before. There was 15 of us, and we're doing circles, and basically we found a camp, and we camped out and put our tents up, and then we did a walking meditation with little lanterns. Actually, it wasn't lanterns, it was flashlights, and we were just walking around in circles, and these hikers were walking past, and just looking at us, and I was kind of looking at them from the corner of my eye, and they're probably thinking, God, look at all those Satanists in the middle of the Appalachian Trail. But yeah, but after a while it just didn't stick with me either. It just didn't click. So that's very fascinating. That's a fascinating story. So what are your plans from now?
My plans from now is I have a really strong desire that I feel is linked to my purpose to lay hands on people, to keep doing massage and body work, but I would also like to expand that into sessions where I lay hands and see things and go into that if people are willing. Because I started working out in Marlborough about 2.5 years ago. 3 years ago, and it exploded there. The clients coming in, I was constantly seeing colors. There was one lady who went to, she was learning some kind of angelic healing modality by Boston, and I didn't know this, but I saw an angel in the room. And I saw a color it was. And so I decided to step out and tell her this. And she said that she's doing that. She was leaving to go there. And that the color I saw was related to the angel that she works with. So I think I saw a magenta purple in the corner of the room. And then I knew it was an angelic presence that was overseeing the body work I was doing on her. And then she said, so afterward I told her what I saw and everything, and she said those colors and whatnot related to, I think it began with an M, Melchizedek or I don't know the names of them, but it was a specific angel that relates to that color.
That must have blown her away, given validity to her work.
So then I had a friend, so then I ended up having people word of mouth have people come to me. So I had another woman who came to me. She fell from I forget how many stories, but she fell from a building, broke every bone in her body. Some of the other therapists were afraid to work on her, so I took her. And she, right away, as soon as she was on my table and we were talking to each other, she went into having her near-death experience, falling out of the building and everything, and how she's sensitive to things ever since then, so she knew I was. So we ended up having this like really high-level conversation where we were both telling each other exactly what we were seeing to each other. So she even saw, so I lost a baby boy. I was a few months along and I lost a baby. And the time that she saw him in the room with me, and the age he would be if he had been born.
Wow.
And she said that she saw him in the corner giving me a thumbs up and that he was really proud of me. Which is like, that's like, using gifts like that, that's the way that's the proper use of the gifts, because that was completely healing for me, and
that's
confirming.
awesome.
Yeah. And I was able to tell her things too. So more and more of things like that kept happening, which is then I decided, like, I really had a fire under my ass after that I should open my own place, and because I could only do so much where I was. You know what I mean? They have their own, business, their franchise. I can't, so I should branch off and just start my own thing.
Right, do you have a daytime job as well, or is this your full-time gig?
This is full-time. That's
great.
Yep.
So this illness that you had has kind of been a blessing in disguise. Do you look at it that way?
Yes, because and Scripture says it, that God uses all things to work together for good. I don't think He caused my illness. Right. I don't think He ordained my illness. It happened. I don't think He gave it to me to glorify Him or anything, but He can use it for good. And He has.
It's very inspiring. For people that don't believe that there's anything out there, like people search their whole lives for stuff that you discovered very early in life. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think like it would have been hard to go through everything if I hadn't. So even if it is like placebo or you believe it so you can get through things, well, it worked. It's worked. Yeah. I've gone going through all that illness and everything, and then losing my child and everything. Like I can see why people would lose their will to live. So it's something it's just really sustained me, and I know that's Him. And that last near-death experience I had from the flu is what solidified that I've gone through all these things. Like He's always with me through all of it.
I'm gonna get the flu shot next year though. My wife got the flu shot and still got it. She got the flu this year. But yeah, that's an amazing story. For sure. What's your place called?
Heaven at Hand.
Heaven at Hand?
Yep.
And that's on Clinton High Street?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you very much, Kelly, for telling me your story. That was quite fascinating, and I hope everybody gets something from it.
Cool. Thank you.